Good evening. I'm not sure what's going to happen to this if this gets kept on the channel or how I deal with this. I don't know. I feel like I can't, I kind of can't wait anymore. I've been watching a lot of, I've been listening to a bunch of reviews of the Godzilla movie and stuff. And it just played here. It opened last week in an IMAX theater in town here. Um, so it's good to see that that Godzilla Minus One is getting some exposure broader than kind of how I went to see it on the opening night there. So I guess as people seem to do on the YouTubes, spoilers galore. I'm going to kind of talk about some things, and I will absolutely 100% spoil things. I guarantee it. So don't go any further if you haven't seen it and you intend to see it. Um, and if you, sorry, there's stuff coming up here. Okay. Um, if you intend to see it, if you don't want to know anything, if you want to go in cold, absolutely don't go any further. Go and see it. Um, I hesitate to recommend it strongly, even though every fiber of my being wants to literally walk up to people on the street, complete strangers, and tell them that they need to see this movie. But so keeping that in mind, spoiler, 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 spoiler. Fair warning. Gorvidal, how are you? So when it opened here in Winnipeg, it just played at the one theater. It played at it's kind of a smaller theater. It's got these reclining chairs. The screen is a little smaller. The sound system is just okay. It's not the best, but it's not shitty by any stretch. But it was the only theater that it opened up in town in, and that kind of surprised me a little bit. Um, Thoughts on that are it's a subtitled movie, so I'm guessing that they didn't think maybe it would do so well. Maybe it was something to do with the distribution model itself. Maybe they could only open in that. I don't know enough about that world to even guess at it. The thing that blows my mind though is it's Godzilla. This isn't like some subtitled movie that is um, coming from somebody that nobody's heard of about a character that nobody's heard of. It's not like it's Parasite or something, which again made quite an impact. So I guess I don't quite understand the limited opening. Really, really glad to see that that only lasted that first week. Second week, it did open at an IMAX theater. We have one close to us. So I couldn't resist. A couple of the guys in our bowling chat had mentioned they were going to try to go to see it this past week. That didn't happen. I went anyway. I kind of sent a message. I'm going on Thursday at 1 o'clock. If you want to join me, this is where I'll be. When I went on opening night, there was empty seats. When I went to the matinee show 1 p.m. on Thursday, there was maybe 6 or 8 of us in the theater, in an IMAX theater, so a much bigger. And that kind of surprises me. And I'm seeing a lot of these reviews online. And one thing that I'll say to you, if you do see it and you want to hear what people think, or if you haven't seen it and you're maybe hesitant because you're seeing what people are talking about, ignore all this horse shit about Hollywood has a lesson to learn. Hollywood is scared. Everybody's scared, yada, yada, yada. Like this, people are trying to kind of culture war this movie, which always drives me fucking crazy. I always get annoyed by that kind of thing when you have to kind of frame it in a certain way as clickbait is really just fucking irritating. So ignore all of that shit. Locally, some people did not want to see it because it had subtitles. Positive reviews and word of mouth have changed minds. One guy I know has seen it 4 times. There was this, that's fantastic to hear. There was this woman I dated a lifetime ago and sat down one night to watch a movie. Don't remember what it was. This was forever ago. And it was a subtitled movie. And as soon as it started playing, she turned to me and said, "Oh, we're going to have to read during this." And in my head, I knew that that was it. This relationship was over. Wonderful person, but that really was a turning point. Um, so ignore all those bullshit reviews that people want to culture war shit to death. Fuck those people. Get a fucking hobby. Um, Hate it. There is some really good reviews out there though. Um, so I don't let it sway you. If you're the type of person that lets reviews sway you, like listening to this one, for example, don't let any of that sway you. Make your own decision. So I saw the trailer when it first came out and was excited ever since seeing that trailer. There was something about the Godzilla Minus One trailer that really implanted something in my head that this looks like it's going to be different. There was heavy duty, war torn city elements, the time that it takes place just at the end of World War II. So that it had a bunch of things going for it where I was like, ooh, this might actually be something. Shin Godzilla was the one that I think was it 2017 or something, maybe? I don't know. Shin Godzilla, the other kind of high point in the whole Godzilla lineage, including, of course, the original one. They kind of all shared that element. From what I remember about Shin Godzilla, it had a very military kind of viewpoint, and it just spoke to about the creature and the whole situation in a different way than some of the other ones. I love Godzilla movies. I'm one of the few. I love the American stuff. I always have. Um, I have this ability to parse things. It's fucking Hollywood. When Hollywood takes a product and they're going to deliver a blockbuster, you just have to shut the fuck up and either go and see it and enjoy it for what it is, or don't go and see it. But it is going to be a specific thing. It's the Hollywood system. It exists purely to make money. They aren't going to get smart writers to do things. They just aren't. And no amount of smashing your head against the stucco wall is going to change that. And it's something I learned from teenage years of enjoying more arty movies and independent movies. I always knew right away you don't go to Hollywood for that. Doesn't mean that some stuff doesn't come out from them that kind of genuinely surprises. For sure it does. But to expect that system to change because there's something like Godzilla comes along and blows people away. For the love of comics, hello, nice to see you. It's been a long time. Um, that whole system isn't there for that. So, sorry, I may ignore the chat a little bit. I don't mean to. I'm losing my train of thought there for a second. So, when I saw that trailer, it felt like it had something that was there in the original Gojira, the original Godzilla movie. It felt like I felt an excitement watching that trailer, like, oh, this looks like it's going to be something. So I couldn't resist. I had to go on opening night, and then I had to see it a second time. My brother is in town now. I've told him he should see it. I may go along with him. I was telling Jaden he should go to see it. I may go along with him. I may be like your buddy and see it 4 times. Because honestly, I want to see it again. And that's pretty rare for me, going to a theater to see a movie multiple times. I think the last time I did it was probably Pulp Fiction. I went to see that a number of times in the theater because it just completely blew me away the first time I saw it, like it did for many people. So anyway, there's so many things about Godzilla Minus One to absolutely love, and the treatment of it's a writer, director, visual effects supervisor who's kind of at the helm. There's a Naoki Sato, I think is his name, does the soundtrack, and it's one of the most incredible soundtracks I think I've ever heard for a movie. And it's because it works so well because it's a Godzilla film and you expect percussion and you expect dun dun dun, all that kind of stuff, which I do love. This kind of goes the opposite direction. They do have to put the Godzilla theme in there. I've heard people talking that it felt a little shoehorned in there. I didn't think so. I thought it was natural. I thought it was an amazing use of the theme song and kind of tying in the whole world. And, you know, there is some kind of staples that people are looking for. The soundtrack is so minimal and experimental and abstract that I think there was a few moments I was paying even more attention to it the second time I went on that big kind of in the big theater in the IMAX and the better sound and things. I sat in a different place than I did in the first one to kind of like try to get a good spot for myself, which was easy in a mostly empty theater. There's so many moments where the sounds that are being created on the soundtrack are almost atmospheric, and they're so incredibly unsettling, and the way the music is used and the way that it builds is really creates such an unsettling feeling in stuff that's already unsettling. Because in this one of the things that struck me right at the beginning when you first see Godzilla, he is fucking terrifying. There's the very, very first shot when you see him. It is a monster. This isn't a dinosaur. This isn't something that looks a little odd or anything like that. This is a monster, and you should be scared shitless. And it's a really amazing opening shot. The very, very first time you see him. So well handled, the lighting and everything as far as the effects go. And I think that's another thing about this one. It kind of treats Godzilla as this symbol of just horror and destruction and absolutely unstoppable, just unstoppable and uncaring, just is there to dominate. And that is such a powerful way to deal with that character. You can do, I think, what was kind of intended by it. This idea, the idea of zombies, of they're just going to keep, the slow walking zombies to some people, myself included, are a little bit scarier than the ones that run because they're this relentless force. They are going to get you, and it's just going to happen. So they don't need to run. They don't need to be faster than you. You're fucked. So it's the same thing with Godzilla. Like, you need to run because those dead lizard eyes or monster eyes don't see you as anything worth even considering, and it just lays waste to everything. So the story opens with this kamikaze pilot who's, we find out pretty quickly, has pretended that his plane has issues, and he's unable to complete his mission, which of course is to kill himself. That's the whole point of the kamikaze pilots. And he lands on this island, Odo Island, maybe is what it's called. I don't remember. Oko, Odo, something like that, maybe. And the story just kind of opens from there. And I think that's the other thing that this one does so well, is this character. The characters themselves are like so incredibly full, and they just have such an interesting arc. And the main character especially, this is a full-on fear-stricken and PTSD, especially as the movie goes on, the way that he kind of is dealing with stuff, and it's palpable, and he completely crumbles a few times. It is powerful stuff, which leads me to the other part of like the balance of kind of the, you go to a Godzilla movie to see destruction. You go to a horror movie to get the shit scared out of you. You go to a superhero movie to see specific things, right? Like, you go to see Godzilla trash a city. I've never been more upset seeing Godzilla trash a city in my life than in this movie. And again, it's treated in a different way. The other stuff, there is still the destruction for sure, but even though you kind of know inherently that, oh, those buildings that he's smashing down, those are people in there, and people are kind of dying because of this giant monster laying waste to their city. This is a different kind of impact, and the maybe I'll get to it in a minute. So the whole buildup of the character and the way the monster is used in it, and balancing it out with those human moments and the actor-driven moments, are handled really well. Because sometimes the human story of these movies can be really, it's good enough, like when I talk about some books every week where it's like, yeah, there's a story here, it got me to go to the next page and kind of keep reading. That's kind of what a lot of the human drama moments are. And then when you get into stuff like the American ones, those human drama moments are sometimes just excruciating to sit through. It's like dying for it to be over so you can get back to the giant monster laying waste to the city. This was almost the opposite at times, where I was so drawn into the story itself of the characters and their world that it didn't matter that it had been 10, 15 minutes since we'd seen Godzilla. It just didn't matter. Um, so our main character kind of goes through all of these stages. Um, I mean, he's spit on and slapped pretty much when he comes back to his home, and it's leveled, and the neighbor woman is still alive, and his parents are dead, and everybody else is dead. Her children are dead. And then she kind of, what the hell are you doing here? You're a fucking kamikaze pilot. And basically calls him out and calls him a coward, and just this kind of disgust that people had in this movie. And I'm sure in real life, if this was, like, there's all this survivor's guilt, which can be a conversation too, just in any sort of war. You make it out alive and you start feeling that guilt, but when your mission is to kill yourself and you come back alive, that's something you can't quite hide. That's kind of out there in the open. So seeing him kind of travel through this and gain this family, he meets a woman who's rescued a baby. So the three of them, they're not even related, and they end up building this relationship together. And it's a beautiful relationship and genuinely heartwarming and genuinely upsetting when that little girl cries a couple of times. One time when the dad, who's still in the throes of going through shit, basically tells her, reminds her that I'm not your father. I'm not your dad. This isn't your mom. And the guys at the table kind of just ride him on it. Like, that's fucking cruel. What the hell is wrong with you? All of those moments really add to the character. And then when you do finally see Godzilla and see what he's doing and laying waste, it's really just even more impactful. And again, I think some of this stuff is more impactful, especially now with the conversations we've been having about Ukraine and Russia, and especially about what's happening in Israel, Palestine. There's this kind of, it brings another level to it. And it just kind of, again, shows so many things, like the propaganda of governments to get the citizens to kind of do what they want, and that manipulation, the trauma that people deal with who, again, survive, or even people who lose their families in these conflicts, what it does to a nation, what it does to an infrastructure of even a city or a neighborhood, and how that completely fucks up people's lives for potentially generations. Like, there's all of these things that it just kind of makes you relate in a different way, if regardless of what you feel about what's currently going on in the world, which is and should be horrific to every single motherfucker out there. It should be goddamn horrific. And it's just not, unfortunately, to enough people. So all of that stuff kind of feeds into it. And there's one scene where she ends up, the main character's woman that he's living with ends up going and getting a job in a city, Ginza, I think. He's at home with the daughter, or the pseudo daughter, and the air raid sirens go on, and the radio kind of interrupts and says Godzilla is invading Ginza, of course. And not only invading Ginza, but attacking the train that she's on and picking it up in his mouth, and the usual. So again, it's still within a framework of course that's going to happen. I've heard some people kind of complain about that moment too. Again, I would say you got to kind of let go of some of those complaints, because of course it's going to happen. This is the story of these people. You can't have the things happening in the same town and not have them interact. It doesn't make sense in the story necessarily. I'm sure it could with another writer, but it's going to happen. He goes to kind of save her and kind of get her out of there and go to see if she's okay. Godzilla, I've never seen this in a movie in my life. The visual effects in this movie are unbelievable in so many ways. The kind of realism and the horror that it shows on the screen. And then you get also shots later on in the movie where the CG of Godzilla kind of feels like a man lumbering in a rubber suit. And I love that, the way that Godzilla moves across the landscape in some of them. And it sort of switches throughout the movie. You can see some different takes, subtle takes on it. He's now in Ginza, and he's going to do his atomic breath, and he is going to lay waste. And when he shoots that atomic breath out, and you see the mushroom cloud exploding with Godzilla's head just in the foreground, you're sort of looking over his shoulder, and you see that wave come towards you of the city going to be leveled. Our two main characters are standing kind of in the street. She, without even thinking about it, pushes him into a back alley so he can be shielded from the blast. And just as she does that, the blast hits her and takes her sailing off the screen. When the kind of dust settles, he comes out from around the corner to kind of witness the carnage. Of course, look for her. Where the hell is she? Realizes that most things have been leveled. She's dead. There's no way. And then turns around to see a city that looks like it's been hit by an atomic bomb. And he just breaks down and starts kind of screaming louder and louder as this black kind of shit starts raining down on him. It is the most intense thing I've seen in any movie. And again, this whole like anti-war movies that you must see for this moment alone. I mean, because it's ultimately an anti-war movie. There's propaganda elements in there, but they use that, I think, for storytelling. And again, this idea that people coming out of that feeling like all they know is war, they're going to be ecstatic if they get a chance to kind of go and battle again. They deal with that in this movie as well too. But for like an anti-war kind of movie, seeing that leveling is just incredibly impactful. And it's also just mind-blowing, which I think a lot of the reviewers are coming from, that this is a Godzilla movie. Why the hell am I almost in tears watching this? Why am I like, why is this complex story coming at me from this movie where I'm just supposed to see this giant lumbering beast? Like, so the subversiveness of the whole thing, I think, was incredibly well done. And it all comes down to a good script. If anybody can learn anything, Hollywood or otherwise, if you don't have a good script, man, you ain't got shit. And if you don't have actors that can deliver that, you ain't got shit. Doesn't matter how much your budget is. Doesn't matter how good the special effects are. If you don't have those two core elements, which is just a motherfucker sitting at a typewriter, you got nothing. You got nothing to work with. So it just kind of, because I've seen it twice in 2 weeks, like I literally think about it every single day. There's not a day that goes by where I don't think about this movie. It's just an amazing movie. Forget that it's a monster movie. Forget that it's a kaiju Godzilla movie. Like, it is just a movie, and it's just a fucking incredible movie. And it's also the best Godzilla movie that's been made since the first one. I still haven't sat down and watched the original. I wanted to rewatch that as well. I'll probably do that this week. But I mean, I hope it does well. I feel like it's going to be out of the theaters pretty soon. I hope it gets some life. I know that it was fairly cheap. Again, comparing it to kind of North American system. What was the number that I heard? Did I hear 15 million? Let's look. Yeah, 15 million. Widely reported estimates peg Godzilla Minus One's budget at 15 million. However, writer-director Takashi Yamazaki recently indicated the Toho's 33rd Godzilla installment cost even less. So there you go. So upper end $15 million. I hope it does really well for them. I hope it gets a second life. It's another one of those that I want the soundtrack. I want the DVD or the Blu-ray rather when it comes out. I want some behind the scenes. I also want to see what else this director has done, because I think he did an exceptional job. There's scenes in it that take place in the ocean where apparently like 95% of it was CG, and I couldn't I had no fucking idea. Like you assume obviously the giant monster swimming in the water, that's the CG element, but there's so much even beyond that. And I looked for stuff like that the second time too on a bigger screen to see how that was kind of used. And it's all used it to an incredible effect. It's just a lot of talent there. And it kind of shows, I think, a different way of these days of making these movies. There's other things you need to consider, and there's other skills that you need to have as someone supposedly at the helm, even though there's a million people at the helm with money in their pockets that are kind of running things as well too. But you do need to have someone who has that skill. And I mean, I think it also should be applauded for Toho and the studio, and the studio backing it. I think is incredible that they did back this guy's idea for a movie, for this specific movie rather. Yeah, it's really incredible. I think I touched on everything that I wanted to talk about. Yeah, I think so. I mean, those were the biggest impact moments for sure. Yeah, so see it. It sounds great. Unfortunately, Minus One didn't come to theaters here. I'll just have to turn up the volume at home. Yeah, and I mean, if that's the way that it is, that's the way that it is. I think with TV these days, I imagine you have a pretty decent sized TV. I'm sure you're going to get still some of that same effect watching it there, pardon me, as well as the theater. All right, we'll see if this stays. I don't know how I feel about doing these kind of movies, but the Corridor Crew channel recently had some behind the scenes look at Minus One. Corridor Crew, hey, I'll have to check that out. I'm assuming you mean on YouTube. Corridor Crew. I will check them out. There's the channel there. Yeah, there was a channel that I was watching. These guys, I don't know if I don't recognize their faces. So there's another channel. Oh, maybe it is the Godzilla. Yeah, I did see this then. The visual effects artists react to bad and great Godzilla CGI. I watched that one anyway, so I do know that channel. Cthulhu Luke, hello. You're just in time for me to say goodbye. Thanks very much for tuning into this. And I'm not sure if we're back, if Rasa and I are back today or not. But keep your eyes open on Rasa's channel for hopefully our weekly comic book talk. I got some new stuff I'll talk about as well too. Okay, later.